right. Hello, Kevin here. We have Walden. Yeah, let's read page 3. Hope everyone's doing good tonight. I am. I cleaned the basement out and ready for some fun. So here we go. Page 3. I'll start at the end of page 2. So he's talking about the 12 labors of Hercules. The 12 labors of Hercules were trifling in comparison with those which my neighbors have undertaken, for they were only 12 and had an end. But I could never see that these men slew or captured any monster or finished any labor. They have no friend Iolus to burn with a hot iron the root of the Hydra's head. But as soon as one head is crushed, 2 spring up. I see young men, my townsmen, whose misfortune it is to have inherited farms, houses, barns, cattle, and farming tools, for these are more easily acquired than got rid of. Better if they had been born in the open pasture and suckled by a wolf, that they might have seen with clear eyes what field they were called to labor in. Who made them serfs of the soil? Why should they eat their 60 acres when man is condemned to eat only his peck of dirt? Why should they begin digging their graves as soon as they are born? They have got to live a man's life, pushing all these things before them, and get on as well as they can. How many a poor, immortal soul have I met, well nigh crushed and smothered under its load, creeping down the road of life, pushing before it a barn 75 feet by 40, its Augean stables never cleansed, and 100 acres of land, tillage, mowing, pasture, and wood lot. The portionless, who struggle with no such unnecessary inherited encumbrances, find it labor enough to subdue and cultivate a few cubic feet of flesh. But men labor under a mistake. The better part of the man is soon plowed into the soil for compost. By a seeming fate, commonly called necessity, they are employed, as it says in an old book, laying up treasures which moth and rust will corrupt, and thieves break through and steal. It is a fool's life, as they will find when they get to the end of it, if not before. It is said that Deucalion and Pyrrha created men by throwing stones over their heads behind them. And then he quotes some Latin. And I think this page is really great. This is what really gets me. This is what brought me into Walden and why I wanted to do this. I mean, he compares the 12 labors of Hercules with what he is seeing people do around him every day. But he said Hercules had it he had 12 laborers. He had his friend Iolus, who came to help him, who, when he took the hot iron, the root of Hydra's head, but as soon as one head is crushed, two spring up. At least he had a friend who could stop that Hydra head from popping up. But he sees his fellow townspeople and he's like, they don't have that. Hercules had it easy compared to them. And, it's funny. I think what he was seeing back then in the 1830s and 40s, it just seems to ring so true today. You just look at people and they have all these hydras popping up around them, and they have so many tasks that just never ends, right? You just go on and on and on. You don't have an Iolus who can take that hot ember and stop it. You're just sort of stuck in this perpetual motion machine. So I don't know. For me, that really resonates. And I love how he takes this sort of contrarian view, a counter view, where you look at people who I see he says this, I see young men, my townsmen, whose misfortune it is to have inherited farms, houses, barns, cattle, and farming tools, for these are more easily acquired than got rid of. As someone who just moved a family from Texas to Colorado and had a house basically full of junk, and I don't know, you look at all the other things you have to keep with a house, and mowing the lawn and cleaning it and repairing things, and it's not an inherited farm or house or barn or cattle or farming tools, but you definitely see what he means. It's a burden. It's nice to have, but it also, there's a handcuff to it. And he says it better than me, of course. Better if they had been born in the open pasture and suckled by a wolf, that they might have seen with clearer eyes what field they were called to labor in. I mean, that passage is really good. And just to dig in here to some of the footnotes there, you get that better if they had been born in the open pasture and suckled by a wolf. For those who don't know, I mean, this is pretty clear. Even I pick up on this as a reference to the Romans. And let me find the annotation here. Yeah. The suckled by a wolf. Footnote 14. The legendary founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus, were raised by a she-wolf after being abandoned as infants. The Rose, February 1851 journal entry adds, America is the she-wolf today, and the children of exhausted Europe, exposed on her uninhabited and savage shores, are the Romulus and Remus, who, having derived new life and vigor from her breast, have founded a new Rome in the West. Yeah. It's interesting to me to think about what America must have felt like back then. It's so many different things. You have so much opportunity, freedom, adventure, a whole country to explore. That's the silver lining. That's the upside. But then, boy, 1840s, 1850s, slavery. So, I mean, what can you say? I mean, yeah, slavery, a country, that dichotomy, Thomas Jefferson writing that Declaration of Independence, all men created equal, while simultaneously owning slaves. And then the other layer, the Native Americans conquering the death, the destruction. But yeah, you see how Thoreau looked at it, the reference to Rome, a republic. I mean, it's complicated, isn't it? But anyway, let's go further here. Another look. That they might have seen with clearer eyes what field they were called to labor in. Yeah. Yeah, you guys who inherited the farm and the tools, you think you were getting into farming, but you didn't really clearly see what labor you were getting into. Your life was going to be handcuffed every day into taking care of those things. And that is a burden. It is. He asks, who made them serfs of the soil? Why should they eat their 60 acres? Here's a good footnote to 15. 60 acres. He used to represent the average Concord farm size, although he used 100 acres for the same purpose sentences later. Let's just go to footnote 16 here. Let's go back. 16, he references, when man is condemned to eat only his peck of dirt. What's he mean by that? 16, a proverb dating back to at least the early 18th century. Quote, we must all eat a peck of dirt before we die. Why should they begin digging their graves as soon as they are born? I mean, wow. I love that sentence. Why should they begin digging their graves as soon as they are born? I mean, I just think about my life with that, and I'm taking my child to kindergarten now, and you get brought into this new schedule. Be here at 9, leave at 4, do your work, go home, do your work, complete your task. And it's a different kind of life, maybe, isn't it, than what we were set out to do. So task driven, so scheduled. I worry about it because I like it. Sort of a free schedule. Anyway. Where did we leave off here? Why should they be digging their graves as soon as they are born? It's a sad thought, isn't it? You're just digging your grave as soon as you're born. They have got to live a man's life. In this footnotes, let's see what 17 says. Possible allusion to William Ellery Channing's on the elevation of the laboring classes. And so here he quotes, few men know as yet what a man is. They know his clothes, his complexion, his property, his rank, his follies, and his. But the thought of his inward being, his proper humanity, has hardly dawned on multitudes. And yet, who can live a man's life that does not know what is the distinctive worth of a human being? I mean, wow. Yeah, that really hits it on the head, doesn't it? You can know his clothes, his complexion, his property, his rank, his follies, his outward life. But the thought of his inward being, his proper humanity, has hardly dawned on the multitudes. It sure feels like that now, doesn't it? And for those who maybe are watching later, it's 2021, August. A new variant of the coronavirus is sweeping through the world, and we see a lot of misinformation and a lot of political games. And you just see that a lot of people don't reflect on those fundamental core principles of what it means to be human, to be a person. It makes me remember some of my earlier readings about Plato and Socrates and, know thyself. The multitudes has hardly dawned on the multitudes. And yet, who can live a man's life that does not know what is the distinctive worth of a human being? Who can live a man's life without knowing the distinctive worth of a human being? All right, let's go back here, back to Thoreau. This third page. I love this third page, in case you haven't noticed. It's so good. How many a poor immortal soul have I met well nigh crushed and smothered under its load, creeping down the road of life, pushing before it a barn 75 feet by 40, its Augean stables never cleansed, and waters of land, tillage, mowing, pasture, and wood lot. All right, I have a footnote here for the Augean stables. I hope I'm saying that right. The fifth of Hercules' 12 labors was to clean the Augean stables, which were home to 3,000 oxen and had not been cleaned for many years. He accomplished it by redirecting the course of 2 rivers through the stables. As someone who spent all day cleaning out this basement that I'm in right now so I don't bother anyone, yeah, I can imagine. What, 3,000 oxen? Good job, Hercules. But let's go back to Thoreau. What does he say here? How many a poor immortal soul have I met well nigh crushed and smothered under its load, creeping down the road of life, pushing before it a barn 75 feet by 40. That's pretty big. Its Augean stables never cleansed. Redirect those rivers. And 100 acres of land, tillage, mowing, pasture, and woodlot. The portionless who struggle with no such unnecessary inherited encumbrances. Find it labor enough to subdue and cultivate a few cubic feet of flesh. Yeah. I get that for sure. It's hard enough taking care of ourselves, isn't it? To really, in the true sense, take care of yourself, and then to add on a whole farm, or a whole however many acres he had here, 100. But and then here I think he gets to it. But men labor under a mistake. Yeah. better part of the man is soon plowed into the soil for compost. That's dark, isn't it? The better part of a man is soon plowed into the soil for compost, and there's a footnote here, 19. Allusion to St. Augustine's The City of God. This is next on my list to read, or pretty close. I have it over here, just haven't read it yet, but yeah, curious to see how this ties together. In any case, the footnote quotes it here. This indeed is true, that the soul is not the whole man, but the better part of man, the body not the whole, but the part of man. Okay, let's go back here. What were we saying? Footnote 19. But men labor under a mistake. The better part of the man is soon plowed into the soil for compost. Now that's kind of confusing to me, because the footnote here to St. Augustine's The City of God says that the soul is not the whole man, but the better part of the man. And that the body is not the whole, but the inferior part. And then Thoreau is saying that the better part of the man, so the soul, is plowed into the soil for compost. But wouldn't you think it's the inferior part, the body, that is plowed into compost? Let's see where he goes here. By a seeming fate, commonly called necessity, they are employed, as it says in the old book, laying up treasures which moth and rust will corrupt and thieves break through and steal. Okay, couple footnotes here. By a seeming fate. Let's see what the footnote says. Okay, it was a, quote, seeming fate, in that transcendentalists believe that people created their circumstances. As Thoreau wrote in 1841, I make my own time. I make my own terms. He summed it up simply in a May 20th, 1860 letter. The principle, the only thing a man makes is his condition or fate. And then it says Emerson had expressed similar views in The Transcendentalist. You think me the child of my circumstances? I make my circumstances. You call it the power of circumstance, but it is the power of me. I mean, I need to read more about transcendentalists, but that rings pretty true to me, at least. I like that. And so he starts his sentence, by a seeming fate. So providing some good background there on what Henry David Thoreau and Emerson were probably debating at that time, fate, what it meant, where people fit in the world. And he says, by seeming fate, commonly called necessity, they are employed, as it says in the old book, in an old book, not the old book, in an old book. And then there's a footnote here. Let's see. 21. For Thoreau, the Bible was an old book. I see. Interesting. With the same status as any other ancient scripture. In the Sunday chapter of A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers, Thoreau grouped all such books together. The reading which I love best is the scriptures of the several nations, though it happens that I am better acquainted with those of the Hindus, the Chinese, and the Persians than of the Hebrews, which I have come to last. I mean, I just kind of love that. I feel a lot of similarity to that. I've read a lot of some Buddhist texts and some Chinese literature. Not so much the Persian that I always grew up reading parts of the Bible, but I've never really read it through completely. It's definitely a goal of mine. But really interesting take there. I mean, I love his way that he doesn't say it's the old book, it's an old book. And this was really interesting to me when I first looked at this, was how he was so well read with these other cultures, the Hindus, Chinese, Persians, Hebrews. I mean, surprising to me. And I guess that's a big difference from when you look back at like the ancient Greeks or Romans, and that, some of these texts had not really been widely disseminated yet. So by Thoreau's time, we can now see, like, yes, for someone like him interested in it, the text was available, and he was certainly looking at it. And it reminds me too, one of my big influence on me was reading Gandhi and his book. And he was similar. He seemed to be a person who read all these old texts that the religions are based off of and just kind of took what he thought was the most influential from each of those. And I don't know, I respect that. That's kind of my approach as well. So interesting to seeing a guy like Thoreau in 1800s. I don't know, just interesting to me. He taking the same approach there. I just didn't think they were looking at those things. In any case. And then we have, so he says in an old book, laying up treasures which moth and rust will corrupt and thieves break through and steal. So then there's another footnote. It's allusion to Matthew 6:19-20. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. All biblical references are to the Authorized King James Version. It's a fool's life, as they will find when they get to the end of it, if not before. Yeah. It is said that, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Deucalion and Pyrrha created men by throwing stones over their heads behind them. And we get another footnote here. I think this is more ancient. In Greek mythology, Deucalion and Pyrrha were the lone survivors of a great deluge brought upon the earth by the wrath of Zeus. To repopulate the earth, they were directed by the oracle of Themis, or Themis, to throw stones behind themselves. Those Deucalion threw became men, and those thrown by his wife Pyrrha became women. He quotes some Latin next, and I think we'll dive into that next time. But as you can see, I really enjoy page 3. There's a lot here. And thank you for joining me. And I'll see you tomorrow with page 4.